At our divorce hearing, my husband told the judge he'd live off my fortune. I didn't flinch. I just sat there, hands folded in my lap, watching him smile like he'd already won. He had no idea what was coming. None. Ever been so betrayed you felt the world tilt under your feet? That moment in the courtroom, staring at the man I'd loved for 32 years, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Something patient. He leaned back in his chair like he owned the room. Like he owned me. Your Honor, he said, his voice smooth as bourbon. I'll be living quite comfortably off her estate. She's not exactly destitute. He glanced at me, that crooked smile spreading across his face. The one that used to make me weak. The one that now made my skin crawl. My lawyer, Gretchen, grabbed my wrist under the table. A warning. Or maybe support. I squeezed her hand back and whispered something that would have sounded crazy to anyone listening. Let him talk. He's digging his own grave. The judge adjusted his glasses, unmoved by Clinton's performance. I'd already filed the paperwork 3 months ago. Every account, every investment, every piece of my family's legacy had been moved to a trust the day I hired Gretchen. Clinton didn't know. He was standing there in his borrowed confidence, about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply you ignored your gut? Have you ever let someone into your life, into your home, into your bank account, only to wake up one morning and realize they were never who you thought they were? That's what I was thinking about as he kept talking, kept bragging, kept digging. Clinton had charmed his way through 3 decades with me. He'd charmed his way into my heart when I was young and hopeful. He'd charmed his way into my home, my finances, my family's business. And now he was trying to charm his way into my money on the way out. But patience changes you. Heartbreak changes you. And when you finally see someone for who they really are, you realize you don't need rage to win. You need strategy. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of the judge's pen against his desk. Clinton was still talking, explaining how he'd been this stable partner all these years, how he'd supported my career, how he deserved his share. None of it was true. Every word was a performance. I thought about my father's watch, the one Clinton had stolen and given to his mistress. I thought about the lipstick on his collar last summer. I thought about the bank transfers he didn't think I knew about, the secret accounts, the lies stacked on lies like bricks building a wall between us. My hands were steady. My breathing was controlled, because I already knew how this ended. Clinton finished his little speech and looked at me, expecting me to break. Expecting me to cry or rage or beg. I just smiled. Quiet. Small. The kind of smile that says everything without saying a word. The judge turned to me and said, Mrs. Alden, would you like to respond? I stood up slowly, smoothing down my skirt. My mother taught me that grace isn't about being weak. It's about being strong enough to choose peace over revenge. But peace doesn't mean you let someone steal from you. Peace means you take back what's yours with such elegance that they never see it coming. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady as stone, I'd like to submit evidence clarifying exactly what belongs to whom. Clinton's smirk froze on his face. Something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or fear. That's when everything changed. What I'm about to tell you next will shock you. It shocked him. It shocked the entire courtroom. Because at that moment, 15 minutes into his grand performance, my husband was about to discover that he'd already lost everything. And I'd done it so quietly, so carefully, that he never even saw my hand move. They say love is blind. I say love is stupid when you're young enough to believe the stories men tell you. Clinton Alden walked into my life on a Saturday afternoon in 1992, and I swear I could have written poetry about the way he smiled. I was 26. He was 31. He wore a charcoal suit and smelled like expensive cologne, and when he looked at me, I felt like the only woman in the world. We met at a gallery opening in Asheville. My father had just retired, and I was running the family furniture business. Clinton was smooth. Too smooth, I realize now. but back then smooth felt like confidence. It felt like someone who had his life figured out and maybe, just maybe, could figure out mine too. You shouldn't be here alone, he said, handing me a glass of wine. A woman like you deserves an escort. I laughed. Actually laughed. Like I was in some old movie. Within 3 months, he'd moved into my house. Within a year, he had access to my accounts. Within 5 years, I'd stopped questioning anything he did. Remember when you first felt that spark with someone? That electricity that made you believe anything was possible? Clinton gave me breakfast in bed on Sunday mornings. He'd dance with me in the kitchen. He'd whisper promises about the future, about our family, about forever. I wanted so badly to believe him that I trained myself not to notice the small things. The way his eyes would go flat when he thought I wasn't looking. The way he'd disappear for hours without explanation. The way he'd touch my shoulder just a little too hard when I disagreed with him. Have you ever ignored your gut because love felt better than truth? That's what I did. That's what he counted on. By year 2 of our marriage, Clinton had convinced me to bring him into the business. He started making decisions. Big ones. And when I asked questions, he'd smile that smile and say, "Don't worry, darling. You can trust me. I've got this. Let me handle it." And fool that I was, I listened. He started suggesting changes. Modern furniture instead of the classic pieces my father had built his reputation on. Faster production, cheaper materials, bigger margins. He wanted to scale up, expand, modernize. Your father's way is dying, he'd say. The world is changing. We need to change too. It felt like progress. It felt like partnership. It was neither. Clinton slowly started pushing me out of the day-to-day operations. He'd schedule meetings I wasn't invited to. He'd make decisions and present them to me as facts rather than discussions. And every time I tried to take back control, he'd remind me how much the business had grown under his leadership. How much money we were making. How grateful I should be. I wasn't paying attention. That was my mistake. By year 7, Clinton controlled the finances, the staff, and most of my life. He'd complain if I wanted to visit my mother. He'd criticize what I wore. He'd correct me in front of people like I was a child who didn't know how to speak. And I'd let him. Because somewhere between the dancing and the promises, I'd stopped believing in myself. Then one afternoon, while Clinton was out, I noticed something was wrong. My father's watch wasn't on the bookshelf where it always sat. The watch he'd given me the day he passed. The one thing in the world that mattered more to me than anything. Just gone. I searched everywhere. The bedroom. The office. The study where we kept valuable things. Nothing. I called Clinton. He said he hadn't seen it. I believed him, even though something inside me knew he was lying. 3 days later, I was scrolling through Facebook and there it was. A photo of Clinton standing with a blonde woman I'd never seen before. Her arm was around his waist, and my father's watch was on his wrist, catching the light like it was made of gold. That night, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the empty space on the shelf. My hands were shaking, not from anger, from clarity. And in that clarity, I finally heard my own voice, the one I'd buried under years of compromise and fear. It whispered something simple but powerful. Time to start keeping your own time. A missing watch doesn't sound like much when you say it out loud. But it wasn't really about the watch. It was about what the watch meant. It was about my father, who'd built something real with his hands. It was about my family legacy. And it was about the fact that Clinton had no problem stealing from me, lying to my face, and humiliating me on social media. When you discover something like that, everything else starts to make sense. Suddenly, the little lies aren't little anymore. The missing money from accounts. The land deals I never quite understood. The business partners he'd bring around who I'd never met before. The way my signature appeared on documents I didn't remember signing. I started pulling records, bank statements, property transfers, investment documents. My hands were steady, but my heart was breaking with every page I read. Because what I found wasn't just theft. It was a systematic dismantling of everything I had. Clinton had been moving money out of our accounts into ones I didn't know about. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. He'd taken out loans against the house. He'd leveraged the family business as collateral for deals I never approved. And he'd done it all while telling me that I was lucky to have a man like him managing things. That I wasn't smart enough to understand business. That I should just let him take care of everything. I felt sick. But I also felt something else. Something cold and clear. Because I realized then that Clinton had made a critical mistake. He'd underestimated me. He'd assumed I was too weak, too trusting, too in love to ever fight back. And he'd been sloppy. That's when I called Gretchen. She was a divorce lawyer, but more than that, she was a woman who'd been exactly where I was. She'd sat across from me in her office, looked at the documents I'd brought, and said something I'll never forget. This man didn't just cheat on you, Marjorie. He stole from you. And we're going to make sure he never steals from anyone again. Gretchen was brilliant, strategic. She didn't believe in fighting with anger. She believed in fighting with facts, with paper trails, with documentation so ironclad that no lawyer in the state could argue against it. We spent weeks gathering evidence. Every transaction, every email, every message, every piece of proof that Clinton had been systematically taking my money, my property, and my dignity. Gretchen filed motions I didn't even know existed. She placed holds on accounts. She documented his infidelities, his financial crimes, his violations of our marriage agreement. And then she did something brilliant. She filed paperwork to move all my assets into a trust. Not a trust Clinton knew about. A trust in my name, controlled by me, untouchable by anyone he claimed to have rights to. When we did that, everything changed. The playing field wasn't just leveled. It was tilted in my direction, and I was the only one who knew it. Clinton kept spending money, like he didn't have a care in the world. He kept seeing that blonde woman. He kept lying. He kept acting like nothing had changed. He had no idea that every move he made, every dollar he spent, every day he woke up thinking he was going to walk away rich, was just painting a clearer picture of his own guilt. What Clinton didn't know was that I'd already taken everything back. I just hadn't told him yet. Have you ever kept a secret so big it felt like it might explode out of your chest? That's what it was like, knowing what was coming and watching him live in total ignorance. But I stayed quiet. I smiled. I played the part of the confused, betrayed wife. And I waited. 3 months later, standing in that courtroom listening to him brag about spending my fortune, I felt completely at peace. Because I knew something he didn't. I'd already won. The lipstick incident happened on a Thursday in late August. I remember because I was making Clinton's favorite peach cobbler for his birthday. I was actually thinking about whether he deserved it, whether I should cancel, whether I should just ask him about the blonde woman and be done with it. Then he came home at 11:45 at night, drunk and smelling like perfume. His shirt was unbuttoned, and there it was. A red stain on his collar. Lipstick. Unmistakable. The same shade I'd seen on the Facebook photos. The same blonde had kissed my husband while I was home, worried about whether I'd made the cobbler the way he liked it. I said nothing, just looked at him. He saw me seeing it, and instead of being ashamed, instead of trying to explain or apologize, he got angry. His face went red. His voice got loud. "What are you staring at?" he snapped. "You look like an idiot with that expression." I still didn't say anything. I just waited. And that's when he said the words I never forget. The words that broke something in me that I didn't even know was still whole. "You think your money makes you better than me?" he slurred, getting in my face. "You think you're smarter? You think you're prettier? Your money is the only thing that makes you interesting, Marjorie. Without it, you'd be nothing. Nobody." It was cold. It was cruel. It was the truth finally coming out of his mouth, drunk and unfiltered. And I stood there in my kitchen, covered in flour, listening to the man I'd spent my whole life building a marriage with tell me that I was worthless. Something inside me didn't just crack. It shattered. But I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things or threaten him or make a scene. Instead, I said something that surprised us both. "You're probably right. I should thank you for showing me who you really are." He laughed. Actually laughed. Like I'd just told him a joke. Then he walked upstairs to bed, and I stood in the kitchen alone, covered in flour and betrayal, and the weight of 32 years of bad choices. That peach cobbler sat on the counter all night. I didn't throw it away. I didn't eat it. I just left it there as a monument to stupidity. My stupidity. The stupidity of loving someone who saw you as a bank account instead of a person. The stupidity of compromising your own voice for the sake of keeping peace. Around 3 in the morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and whispered something to myself. It wasn't angry or loud. It was quiet and deadly serious. Justice ain't loud, Marjorie. It's patient. That's when everything shifted. That's when I stopped being the victim. That's when I became the architect of my own comeback. I didn't confront Clinton. I didn't ask him to leave. I didn't give him any warning. Instead, I did something he would never expect. I started documenting everything. Every text message from the blonde woman that accidentally came to our shared account. Every transaction I found. Every piece of evidence that proved he was systematically stealing from me while telling me I was worthless. And I never let him know I was doing it. For 3 months, I lived with Clinton while secretly building a case against him. I smiled when he came home. I made his dinners. I asked him about his day. And every night when he was asleep, I copied files onto a flash drive hidden in my sewing box. He had no idea that the woman he loved was sitting right next to him on the couch, watching television while quietly collecting the proof of every lie he'd ever told. He had no idea that in 90 days, his entire life was going to explode. And he had no idea that I was the one lighting the match. Have you ever realized you had more power than you thought? Have you ever understood that your silence could be a weapon if you aimed it right? That's what those 3 months felt like. Dangerous. Empowering. Like watching someone walk toward a cliff they couldn't see. And the worst part? The most satisfying part? He never suspected a thing. When you're ready to go to war, you don't announce it. You prepare. You gather your weapons. You make sure every detail is accounted for. Gretchen taught me that. She was sitting across from me in her office on a rainy afternoon in November, and she laid out the strategy, like she was playing chess against a man who didn't even know he was in the game. These transfers, she said, pointing at the documents I'd printed out, are fraudulent. These loans he took out without your signature? Forgery. The way he's been selling pieces of the business to people who don't exist? Money laundering. She looked up at me over her reading glasses. Marjorie, your husband hasn't just been unfaithful. He's been committing crimes. Federal crimes. And we have proof of all of it. I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace exactly. More like purpose. Like my life suddenly made sense again, and it was all pointing toward one moment. One day in court where everything would change. Gretchen was methodical. She didn't move fast. She didn't make mistakes. She filed paperwork in a specific order. She contacted banks and investment firms. She worked with
forensic accountants who traced every penny Clinton had stolen. And she did all of it quietly, so quietly that Clinton had no idea what was happening. I was living a double life. During the day, I was the confused, betrayed wife. I'd cry in front of him sometimes. I'd ask him where he was going when he'd leave the house. I'd play the part of the woman falling apart. And at night, I'd sit in Gretchen's office or in my car, going through bank statements and building the case that would destroy him. Every piece of evidence was another brick in the wall. Every document was another nail in the coffin. By December, we had enough to bury him twice over. But we weren't done. Gretchen wanted more. She wanted it so airtight that he wouldn't be able to argue, wouldn't be able to manipulate, wouldn't be able to wiggle out of a single charge. A good case is thorough, she told me, but a perfect case is unstoppable. So we kept digging. We found offshore accounts he'd hidden using a fake name. We discovered properties he'd purchased in her name, that blonde woman's name. We found love letters and receipts for hotels and gifts. Everything that painted a picture of a man who didn't just want to leave his wife. He wanted to erase her. The most damaging thing, though, it wasn't the money. It was the emails. Dozens of emails between Clinton and his business associates where he referred to me as the old money source and the paycheck. Where he joked about bleeding me dry before I figured out what was happening. where he told his friends he was planning to divorce me and take half of everything, then disappear. When Gretchen showed me those emails, I felt something I'd never expected to feel. Relief. Because here was proof that none of it was my fault. I hadn't been stupid for trusting him. He'd just been patient enough to use me. And that knowledge was actually liberating. "This is war," Gretchen said, her voice hard. "And we're going to win." We filed for divorce in January. Clinton didn't see it coming. He got served at the office, and I heard from mutual friends that he went pale. But he didn't panic. He actually smiled. He told people he was about to come into a lot of money, that I was going to regret trying to push him around, that his lawyer was the best in the state. He still had no idea. While Clinton was bragging to his friends about what he'd get in the settlement, Gretchen was filing motion after motion with the court. She submitted evidence of his fraud, his infidelities, his theft, his hidden accounts, every single piece of ammunition we'd collected over 3 months of silent preparation. And then, just before the trial date, Gretchen did the thing that would change everything. She filed paperwork moving all of my assets into a trust. My inheritance from my father, the money I'd earned from the family business, the property, everything, all of it, moved into a trust with my name on it, and only my signature needed to access it. Clinton found out about the trust 3 days before the hearing. His lawyer called Gretchen, furious. But it was too late. The papers were filed. The money was moved. And there was nothing legally that he could do about it. I'll never forget the feeling of sitting in Gretchen's office the morning of the hearing. She looked at me and smiled. He's about to walk into a courtroom thinking he's going to win. And he's about to lose everything. "You ready?" I took a breath. I thought about my father. I thought about that missing watch. I thought about every night I'd spent second-guessing myself. Every moment I'd believed I wasn't smart enough or strong enough or good enough. "I'm ready," I said. And then we walked into the courtroom, and the man who'd stolen my life was about to discover that I'd taken it all back. Have you ever felt the power of your own intelligence? Have you ever realized that the quiet girl everyone underestimated was actually 3 steps ahead the whole time? That's what I felt as I watched Clinton walk in, smiling, confident, completely unprepared for what was about to happen. He thought this day was about him winning. He had no idea it was about me taking back my power. And in about 20 minutes, his entire world was going to collapse. The courtroom smelled like old wood and new carpet, that strange combination of history and bureaucracy. I sat next to Gretchen, my hands folded in my lap like I was sitting in church. My lawyer kept sliding documents across the table to me, pointing at sections I should watch, briefing me on what was about to happen. But I wasn't nervous. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. Clinton walked in at 9:55, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. He had his lawyer with him, a slick guy named Marcus who'd made his reputation defending wealthy men in divorce proceedings. They were joking as they walked past us. Actually joking. Like this was a game they were going to win. Clinton glanced at me and smiled that smile. The one that used to make my heart race. Now it just made me tired. Tired of remembering how many times I'd believed that smile. How many lies I'd accepted because the smile made them easier to swallow. The judge came out. His name was Judge Hammond, and he'd been on the bench for 23 years. Gretchen had told me he was fair. He didn't favor men or women. He favored facts. And boy, did we have facts. The hearing started the way all these things do. Lawyers posturing. Arguments about procedure. Clinton's lawyer making motions that went nowhere. My lawyer blocking them with paperwork I'd already reviewed. It was like watching a dance where both sides knew the steps but nobody was leading. Then Clinton took the stand. And that's when things got interesting. His lawyer walked him through his version of the story. How much he'd supported me over the years. How he'd managed the family business and turned it into something profitable. How I was emotionally unstable, prone to making rash decisions, completely incapable of understanding finance. He was so smooth, so convincing, that if I didn't know the truth, I might have believed him myself. He talked about his future. How he deserved half the assets. How he'd been a loyal partner. How he was looking forward to living comfortably off Marjorie's estate. He said it just like that. Like I was already dead, and my money was already his. The judge didn't even blink. Then Clinton's lawyer smiled and said, "Your Honor, my client should be entitled to half of the marital assets, plus alimony, given the financial disparity in this marriage." That's when Gretchen stood up. She was calm, professional, but there was something else in her eyes. Something that told me she was about to demolish this man's entire case. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence regarding the marital assets in question." She walked to the judge's bench and handed him a folder. Thick, full of documents. Then she handed him another one. And another one. Clinton's face started to change. His lawyer was suddenly not joking anymore. "Your Honor," Gretchen said, her voice steady as stone, "these documents show that my client's assets have been placed in a revocable living trust established on January 15th of this year. The trust is titled in her name alone, and it predates the divorce filing by exactly 2 weeks." The courtroom got quiet. Really quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the air conditioning and nothing else. Clinton stood up. Actually stood up, which made the judge look at him like he'd lost his mind. "That's not fair," he sputtered. "That's—" "Sit down," the judge said. His voice wasn't angry. It was just done. Gretchen continued, "Furthermore, Your Honor, I'm presenting evidence of fraudulent financial transfers, forged signatures, hidden accounts, and systematic theft of marital assets by the respondent." She handed the judge another stack of papers. This one was thicker. Bank statements, email correspondence, property records, the entire history of Clinton's crimes, all documented, all irrefutable, all there in black and white. I watched Clinton's face as he realized what was happening. The color drained out of it like someone had pulled a plug. His lawyer was flipping through pages, his expression going from confident to confused to terrified in about 90 seconds. The judge looked at me. Actually looked at me, like he was seeing me for the first time that day. "Mrs. Alden," he said, "is this trust arrangement something you want to discuss?" I stood up. Slowly. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. I'd practiced this moment 1,000 times in the mirror. This was my moment to take back my life, and I wasn't going to rush it. "Your Honor," I said, "that trust contains my personal inheritance from my father, my earnings from my work with the family business before my marriage, and assets I've accumulated independently. It is not marital property, and it is not subject to division." The judge nodded. He was reading through the documents now, and with each page, his expression got darker. "And these other allegations?" he asked, looking up at me. "All documented and verified," I said. "By forensic accountants, by bank records, and by the respondent's own correspondence." Gretchen stood up again. "Your Honor, we're requesting that the court deny the respondent's claim to any marital assets beyond what's explicitly documented as community property. We're also requesting that the court order a forensic audit of all accounts controlled by the respondent in the past 5 years." Clinton's lawyer tried to object. He tried to argue. He tried to say the evidence was inadmissible or obtained improperly or somehow unfair. But the judge wasn't having it. He was looking at Clinton now with the kind of expression you wear when you've just realized someone is lying to your face, and they're not even trying very hard to hide it. "Let's take a recess," the judge said. "Counselors in my chambers. Now." As the judge left the bench, I watched Clinton. He was gripping the table like it was the only thing keeping him from drowning. His lawyer was putting papers back in his briefcase, with shaking hands. And me? I just sat there, quiet and still, and smiled. Have you ever watched someone realize they've lost? Have you ever seen the exact moment when arrogance turns into desperation? That's what I was watching. That's what my patience had bought me. Gretchen squeezed my hand under the table. "He's finished," she whispered. And he was. He just didn't know it yet. 23 minutes later, the judge came back into the courtroom. He looked tired. Not physically tired, but tired like someone who just had to tell someone hard truths and had no patience left for anything else. Clinton was white. Literally white. Like all the blood had left his face and wasn't coming back. His lawyer kept whispering things in his ear, But Clinton wasn't hearing him.
He was looking at me.
And I could see it in his eyes. He was looking at me like I was someone he'd never met before. Someone dangerous. Someone who'd just destroyed him. The judge sat down and picked up his gavel, and before he even spoke, I knew it was over. Based on the evidence presented, Judge Hammond said, his voice filling the courtroom, "I'm finding that the respondent has engaged in fraudulent transfer of marital assets, has committed financial crimes including forgery and unauthorized use of credit, and has deliberately hidden income and assets from the petitioner." Clinton's lawyer tried to interrupt. The judge held up his hand. "I'm not finished. Given these findings, the respondent is entitled to receive a settlement of exactly nothing.
$0. No alimony.
No claim to marital property. No access to any accounts. And I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for Criminal Prosecution." The gavel came down. It was like thunder in my chest. Clinton actually looked like he might throw up. His face went from white to green, and he gripped the edge of the table like his hands were the only things keeping him tethered to reality. Furthermore, the judge continued, looking directly at Clinton, "The court is imposing a restraining order preventing you from removing any assets or accessing any accounts in your name or under your control. You will make no transfers. You will liquidate nothing. You will remain in the jurisdiction pending the outcome of the criminal investigation." Clinton stood up, so fast his chair fell backward. "This is insane," he said. His voice was shaking. "This is completely unfair. I deserve." "What you deserve," the judge said, his voice cold as ice, "is probably a lawyer who specializes in white-collar crime. Because you're going to need one." The gavel came down again. The judge stood up and walked off the bench. It was done. Just like that. 32 years of marriage, dissolved in 23 minutes in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and truth. I stood up slowly. Gretchen was gathering her papers, moving with the calm efficiency of someone who'd just won. Clinton was still standing there, frozen, like his brain couldn't process what had just happened. His lawyer was already on his phone, probably calling a criminal defense attorney. Then Clinton looked at me. Really looked at me. And I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Terror.
Pure, absolute terror.
The kind that comes when you finally realize that someone you thought was weak was actually strong. That someone you thought you could manipulate had been playing you the whole time. I walked toward him. Slowly. Deliberately. Everyone in the courtroom was watching. The other lawyers. The stenographer. The bailiff. They all watched as I approached my now ex-husband. When I got close enough that only he could hear me, I said something quiet. Something that will probably haunt him for the rest of his life. "I forgive you, Clinton." He looked confused. Like he'd expected rage or triumph or vindictiveness. He'd expected me to be happy he was destroyed. Instead, I was just sad. Sad that it had taken me this long to value myself. Sad that he'd never been capable of loving me the way I deserved. Sad that we'd spent 3 decades together and still ended up as strangers. "Why would you say that?" he whispered. "Because holding on to anger just means you're still letting him control you," I said. "And I've decided I'm done being controlled." I turned around and walked away. Gretchen was waiting by the door, and we walked out of the courtroom together into the bright Asheville sunshine. Behind us, I could hear Clinton's lawyer telling him something about asset seizure and potential prison time. I didn't look back. The parking lot was empty. Gretchen hugged me, and for the first time since this all started, I let myself cry. Not sad tears. Not angry tears. Just tears that had been waiting their whole lives to fall, and now they finally could because I was safe again. "You did it," Gretchen said. "You actually did it. We did it." I corrected her. But inside, I knew the truth. I'd done it. My patience had done it. My quiet had done it. My decision to stop being a victim and start being a strategist had done it. I got in my car and drove home to my empty house. The house that had felt like a prison for so long. But it wasn't my prison anymore. It was my sanctuary. It was the place where I was going to build a new life. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the front porch. The magnolia trees were blooming. The sky was pink and gold. And for the first time in 32 years, I felt like I could breathe. Have you ever realized that your strength was there all along? Have you ever understood that sometimes the biggest victory comes from the quietest battle? That's what I learned sitting on that porch, watching the sunset paint the world in shades of gold and forgiveness. I learned that I was stronger than I'd ever known. And I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's taking back your life. The next morning, Clinton's car was gone from the driveway next door. He'd rented a house about 3 miles away before the hearing, assuming he'd win and move back in. When he realized he'd lost, he'd disappeared like smoke. His lawyer had advised him to cooperate with the investigation, to try to minimize the damage. Fat lot of good that would do him. The news hit the local papers within 48 hours. Wealthy businessman accused of financial crimes. Divorce case reveals systematic fraud. All the details, all the scandal, all the proof of Clinton's lies. People I'd known for decades started calling.
Friends.
Acquaintances. People who'd watched us at church on Sundays and dinner parties, never knowing what was happening behind closed doors. Most of them wanted the same thing. They wanted to know if I was okay, if I needed anything, if I wanted to talk about what happened. I appreciated it, but mostly I wanted to be left alone. I wanted to sit with what I'd done. I wanted to let it settle into my bones and become part of my story. Clinton's lawyer called Gretchen exactly 1 week after the hearing. He wanted to negotiate. Clinton wanted to know if I'd be willing to settle for something. Anything. Could we work this out? Could I drop the criminal referral? Could we maybe just move forward? I told Gretchen the answer was no. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I wanted to see him suffer. But because I'd learned something important sitting on that porch. You don't get to break someone's life and then negotiate your way out of the consequences. You don't get to steal and lie and cheat and then ask for mercy when you're caught. That's not how justice works. That's not how life works. The criminal investigation moved fast. Within 3 weeks, the district attorney's office had enough evidence to bring charges.
Fraud. Forgery. Theft.
Financial crimes that could carry years in federal prison. Clinton hired the best criminal defense lawyer money could buy, but money was the one thing he didn't have anymore. The court had frozen all his assets. He couldn't access anything. Every account I'd known about had been secured. Every property had been placed under a lien. I found out later that he'd moved into a motel on the edge of town. That his girlfriend, the blonde woman, had dumped him the moment she realized he didn't have money anymore. That his friends had started distancing themselves. That he'd gone from being the charming businessman everyone wanted to know to being a cautionary tale people told at cocktail parties. 3 months after the hearing, I received a letter. It came to the house, addressed in handwriting I recognized. My hands were shaking when I opened it. Not from fear. From something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or closure. Inside, Clinton had written a confession of sorts. He'd written about how he'd done it. All of it.
The theft.
The lies. The cheating. He'd written about why he'd done it. Because he felt like he wasn't enough. Because my family's money made him feel small. Because he'd wanted to prove he was smarter than me, more capable than me, better than me. He'd written about how he'd convinced himself that what he was doing wasn't wrong. That he deserved my money because I didn't understand how to manage it. That my naivety had made him do it. That it was somehow my fault he'd become a thief. Then, at the end, he'd written something different. Something that sounded almost like remorse. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I'm sorry for how blind I was. But mostly I'm sorry for myself because I realize now that in trying to take everything from you, I lost everything about myself. I became the person I always feared I was. Empty.
Small.
Worthless. All the things I accused you of being. I guess that's poetic justice. I hope you find peace with what you've done. I hope you can forgive me even though I know I don't deserve it. I read it 3 times. Then I walked to the fireplace and I burned it. Not out of anger. Not out of cruelty. Just because some things don't deserve to be kept. Some letters are meant to be ash. Some apologies come too late to matter. And some men don't get the satisfaction of knowing they've hurt you enough that even their remorse makes an impact. By the time I burned that letter, Clinton had pleaded guilty to most of the charges. He was facing 5 to 7 years in federal prison. The lawyers were working on a deal. But it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't watching anymore. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't giving him any more of my energy or my time or my attention. Have you ever realized that the best way to win is to stop playing? That the most powerful thing you can do is let someone fall without watching them hit the ground? That's what I learned in those 3 months. I learned that revenge doesn't feel the way movies make it seem. It's not satisfying. It's not empowering. It's just empty. What was empowering was walking away. What was satisfying was knowing I'd take my life back. And that's exactly what I started doing. The house needed new paint. I'd been meaning to do it for years, but Clinton had always said it was a waste of money. So I hired a contractor, a woman named Patricia, who'd gone through her own messy divorce years before. We sat on the porch one afternoon while she gave me a quote, and she told me her story. How she'd let a man convince her that she wasn't smart enough to make her own decisions. How it had taken her almost losing everything to realize she was stronger than she'd ever known. "You know what's funny?" she said, sipping her lemonade. After he left, I realized I'd been making all the important decisions anyway. He just convinced me that he was. They're really good at that. Making you believe they're leading while you're actually the one steering the ship. I hired her. And while she and her crew painted my house a soft cream color with bright white trim, I started going through my father's things. Boxes I'd kept in the attic for years. Letters he'd written. Business journals. Photos from when the furniture company was just starting out. And I found something that made me cry. It was a letter he'd written to me, dated about a month before he died. He'd left it with his lawyer to be given to me when the time was right. His lawyer had called me after my father passed, but I'd been so consumed by the early years of my marriage to Clinton that I'd never asked for it. I'd just let it sit in some filing cabinet somewhere, forgotten. In the letter, my father had written about how proud he was of me, about how he'd watched me grow into a strong woman. And then he'd written something that made my breath catch. "I worry sometimes that you'll settle for less than you deserve because you're afraid of being alone. Don't do that, sweetheart. Being alone is not the worst thing that can happen to you. Accepting less than you deserve is. There's a difference between being lonely and being small. Never be small for anyone." I held that letter in my hands and I sobbed. Not because my father was right, but because I'd known he was right the whole time. Some part of me had always known. I just needed permission to listen to myself again. With the money from the trust, I bought back the family furniture company from the corporate entity that had bought it from Clinton when he'd secretly sold it. I brought it back to the historic building in downtown Asheville where it had started. I hired back some of the craftsmen who'd worked for my father. And we started making furniture again the way he'd taught me. Beautiful, timeless pieces.
Pieces that mattered.
The work was healing. Sanding wood. Selecting fabrics. Designing something from nothing. Every piece I built was a conversation with my father. Every chair I finished was a way of saying thank you. Every table was proof that what he'd built, what he'd taught me, was worth preserving. 6 months after the divorce hearing, I walked through my home. The walls were painted. The furniture had been restored. My father's watch was back in its place of honor on the bookshelf, and I'd hired someone to repair it to make sure it still kept perfect time. The magnolia trees outside were in full bloom again, the way they were when I was young, and believed the world was good. I poured myself a glass of tea and sat in the rocking chair on the front porch. It was the same chair my father had sat in, the same view he'd looked at every evening. And for the first time in more than 30 years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The house was quiet. There was no one here to criticize me or control me or make me feel small. There was just me and the sounds of Asheville waking up in the early morning.
Just me and my own thoughts.
Just me and my own life, finally completely wholly mine. One morning about a month later, I was driving through town and I saw him. Clinton was walking down the street with his lawyer. He looked older than he should have. Thinner. Hollowed out. His suit didn't fit right anymore. He'd already served 3 months in a holding facility while his trial was finalized. He was about to start his prison sentence next week. He saw me. Our eyes met for just a second across the parking lot. I expected to feel something. Anger, vindication, satisfaction. But what I felt was just sad. Sad for the life we'd wasted. Sad for the time I'd given to someone who was never going to be capable of appreciating it. Sad for the boy he'd been before he became a man who would hurt someone to feel bigger. I smiled at him. Not a mean smile. Not a triumphant smile. Just a genuine smile that said, "I'm sorry you couldn't figure out how to be happy without destroying someone else's life. I'm sorry you wasted all this time being angry at something that wasn't your fault. I'm sorry you couldn't just love me when I gave you everything." He looked confused by that smile, like he couldn't figure out what it meant. His lawyer hurried him along, and they disappeared around the corner. I never saw him again after that. Have you ever realized that forgiveness isn't for the other person? Have you ever understood that letting go is the most powerful thing you can do? That's what that smile meant. It meant I was finally free. Not from him. I'd been free from him the moment I decided to fight back. I was free from the version of myself that had let him make me small. And that freedom? It was worth everything I'd had to do to get it. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. That's what I've learned in the year since the divorce hearing. Sometimes the most powerful moments in your life come not from screaming or fighting or making a scene. They come from quiet decisions made in the dark. From choosing to believe in yourself when no one else does. From taking back your power one piece at a time. I've built a good life here in Asheville. The furniture company is thriving. I've hired 20 people who love the work the way my father loved it. We've started winning awards for our designs. We've been featured in magazines. And every single piece of furniture that leaves our workshop carries a little piece of my story. A little piece of my healing. I joined a support group for women who'd been through divorce. Not because I needed to be saved, but because I wanted to help save others. I wanted to sit with women who were in the middle of what I'd survived and tell them, "You are stronger than you know. You are smarter than you think. And the life you build for yourself after this will be so much more beautiful than the life you were trying to force before." I've also learned to recognize the signs. The small ways men make you question yourself. The tactics of manipulation. The slow creep of control. I watch women I love, my sister, my nieces, my friends, and I see the pattern sometimes. And I tell them what I've learned. Don't ignore your gut. Your instincts are there for a reason. Your fear is information. And your anger is often just clarity trying to get your attention. Clinton is in federal prison now. He's serving a 5-year sentence. His lawyer said he might get out after 3 with good behavior. I don't think about him much anymore. That's not forgiveness exactly. It's more like indifference. He's become a side character in my story, no longer the antagonist. He's just someone who was in my life for a while and then wasn't anymore. I still live in the same house. I still rock on the porch in the evenings. I still look at my father's watch and thank him for teaching me to believe in myself. But now when I sit on that porch, I'm not sitting with regret. I'm sitting with peace. Real peace. The kind that comes from knowing you did the right thing, even when it was hard. Last week, a woman came into the furniture shop. She was looking at the pieces and she started crying. She told me she'd gone through something similar. A husband who'd stolen from her. A divorce she'd thought would destroy her. But she'd survived it. She was thriving now. And she'd come in because she'd heard my story and she wanted to see the furniture. She wanted to be in a space built by someone who understood. We sat in the back of the shop and talked for an hour. I told her things I'd never told anyone. About how scared I'd been. About how small I'd felt. About how I'd learned that strength isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing the right thing even when you're terrified. It's about believing in yourself when no one else does. And here's what I want you to understand. You might be sitting somewhere right now, and someone in your life might be making you feel small. Someone might be telling you that you're not smart enough, not strong enough, not worthy enough. I want you to know that they're lying. They're lying because they need you to be small so they can feel big. And the moment you stop needing their permission to be yourself, everything changes. Justice doesn't always look like what we think it should. It doesn't always come from outside of you. Sometimes justice is just you deciding that you're worth more than what you've been accepting. Sometimes justice is you taking back your power one quiet moment at a time. Sometimes justice is you walking away and building a better life and not looking back. That's what I did. And I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not sorry for the way I did it. I'm not going to apologize for fighting back. Because I learned something that changed my life, and I want you to know it too. Your silence can be a weapon if you use it right. Your patience can be your greatest strength. Your quiet determination can topple mountains. And sometimes the best revenge is simply deciding to be happy without them. My father used to say, the best furniture is the kind that holds you up without you thinking about it. It just does its job and lets you be who you are. That's what I learned to do in that courtroom and after. I learned to hold myself up. I learned to support myself. I learned to be the thing I'd been looking for in other people all along. I'm telling you this story because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear it. Someone needs to know that it's possible to survive betrayal. Someone needs to understand that the quiet girl they think is weak might be the strongest person in the room. Someone needs permission to fight back. Someone needs to know that justice doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it whispers. And sometimes that whisper changes everything. If this story touched your heart today, if it made you think about the choices you're making, if it reminded you of your own strength, I want to ask you something. Please subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Because there are more stories coming. Stories about women who fought back. Stories about people who chose themselves. Stories about quiet justice and loud healing. And if you have a story like mine, I want to hear it. I want you to share it in the comments. I want you to tell me how you took back your power. I want you to inspire someone else the way I hope I've inspired you today. Because that's what this is really about. It's about building a community of people who understand that you don't have to stay small. You don't have to accept less. You don't have to let someone else write the end of your story. You get to write it. You get to decide. And you get to do it so quietly that people won't see it coming until it's already done. I'll be back next week with another story. Another woman. Another journey. Another whisper that turns into thunder. So hit that subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. And get ready to hear about lives transformed, power reclaimed, and justice served with grace. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. I hope I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, remember, justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And sometimes that whisper is everything.